On the banks of the Mississippi, ancient legends told of a lost American city soaring with mounds and mysteries no one could explain. For decades, experts insisted its builders were only local tribes, but buried beneath its towering earthworks, DNA would expose a far more astonishing truth. The people who made America's first metropolis weren't from one place at all. Their origins span hundreds of miles, rewriting everything historians believed about migration, power, and ambition in early North America. So how did a city of strangers rise, and why did it suddenly vanish, leaving more questions than answers? At the heart of the Mississippi Valley, a city once sprawled across nearly 6 square miles, an expanse so vast that its boundaries vanished into the horizon. More than 120 earthen mounds rose from the floodplain, some shaped like flat-topped pyramids, others built as broad ridges or gentle domes. The largest of them all, Monk's Mound, towered 10 stories high and covered 5 hectares at its base. Even today, it stands as the biggest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas, 100 feet tall, built entirely by human hands, each basket of dirt carried from the surrounding fields. Cahokia's central plaza stretched the length of 35 football fields, end to end. Around it, neighborhoods clustered in tight rows, their wooden homes and thatched roofs pressed close together. At its peak, the city held between 10 and 20,000 people, more than lived in London or Paris at the same time. The density was staggering, with thousands crowded into an area smaller than a modern suburb, their daily routines unfolding in the shadow of the mounds. The city's layout followed a strict order. Wide causeways connected ceremonial plazas, while palisade walls, 12 feet high, lined with bastions, cut through residential districts. Some mounds served as platforms for temples or council lodges. Others marked burial grounds, their shapes and sizes hinting at the status of those interred within. The construction required more than 55 million cubic feet of earth, moved over generations and shaped into precise geometric forms. From above, Cahokia resembled a carefully planned capital, its grid of mounds and plazas radiating outward from Monk's Mound like spokes on a wheel. Archaeologists have traced the alignments of certain mounds to astronomical events, suggesting an understanding of the stars woven into the city's design. Every feature, every mound, every ditch, every open space seems to have served a purpose. The sheer scale of labor demanded by such a city raises questions that echo through time. How did people organize themselves to build and maintain a metropolis of this magnitude? What kind of leadership, coordination, or belief could move thousands to work together on a project that spanned centuries? The answers remain buried in the earth, waiting for clues in the bones and artifacts left behind. Stories once swirled around Cahokia's origins, fueled by legends and speculation. Among the most persistent was the tale of a lost band of Welsh explorers, led by Prince Madoc, who supposedly sailed up the Mississippi centuries before Columbus and built the mounds as monuments to their vanished kingdom. Early settlers and amateur antiquarians clung to this myth, eager for an explanation that fit Old World expectations. But as the first scientific excavations began in the 20th century, the evidence simply didn't add up. Archaeologist Melvin Fowler arrived at Cahokia in the 1950s with a different approach. He brushed aside the romantic tales and turned to the dirt itself, searching for proof in the layers beneath the grass. What he found was not the handiwork of medieval Europeans, but a city built by people whose lives were deeply rooted in the American heartland. Fowler's teams uncovered household debris scattered across the site, broken pots, stone tools, animal bones, and charred corn kernels. These were unmistakably indigenous artifacts, shaped by hands that knew the rhythms of the Mississippi Valley. Yet for all the clarity these finds brought, the real mystery only grew sharper. The sheer volume of material, tons of pottery shards, thousands of stone arrowheads, and the remains of countless meals hinted at a population far larger and more organized than any local tribe described in the oral histories of the region. Fowler mapped out neighborhoods and ceremonial precincts, each layer revealing years of constant building, burning, and rebuilding. The pattern suggested not a single explosion of growth, but wave after wave of renewal, as if new groups arrived, settled, and left their mark. Despite the mountain of evidence, the old legends lingered on. Some clung to the idea that the city's builders must have come from far away, unable to accept that local people could have created something so monumental. Fowler's careful work dismantled the European myth, but it left a gap that begged for a new explanation. If not Welsh princes, then who? The city's scale and complexity demanded answers beyond folklore. The next clues would come not from stories or surface finds, but from the bones and burials locked deep within the mounds themselves. In the shadow of Monk's Mound, one grave stands apart from all others, a burial so lavish that it has captivated archaeologists for decades. The so-called Birdman burial, uncovered in Mound 72, revealed a man laid to rest on a bed of more than 20,000 marine shell beads. The beads, arranged in the shape of a soaring bird, shimmered in the soil, each one carried from distant Gulf Coast waters hundreds of miles away. Surrounding the central figure were the remains of other men and women, some placed with care, others bundled or scattered, their positions hinting at ritual and hierarchy. Dr. Kristen Hedman, a leading bioarchaeologist, has spent years studying these elite interments. She points to the grave goods, copper-covered axes, finely worked arrowheads, and the sheer volume of shell beads as proof of immense power and influence. Only those at the very top could command such resources or orchestrate ceremonies on this scale. Isotope analysis of their bones suggests a diet rich in maize, a luxury at the time, while the presence of non-local materials speaks to far-reaching connections. Yet the Birdman burial raises a deeper question. Where did these elites come from? The opulence of their graves, the exotic origins of their adornments, and the diversity of those buried nearby all suggest a leadership class that was anything but insular. The evidence points to a society where power drew people and goods from far beyond the valley, setting the stage for revelations that would upend everything once believed about Cahokia's origins. Beneath the carefully shaped mounds, archaeologists uncovered a scene that stands in stark contrast to the grandeur above. In Mound 72, away from the platform burials of the elite, a mass grave held the remains of more than 50 young women, their bodies laid side by side in tightly packed rows. Many showed no signs of violent trauma, but the arrangement and context left little doubt. These were sacrifices, carried out as part of a single, orchestrated event. The women, most between the ages of 18 and 23, had been buried at the same time, their arms at their sides, faces turned upward, with little in the way of personal belongings or offerings. Dr. Kristen Hedman describes the grave as both chilling and illuminating. The careful placement of the bodies, the uniformity of age and sex, and the absence of grave goods point to a ritual purpose. These were not family groups, nor victims of war or epidemic. The evidence suggests they were brought together for a ceremony that demanded human lives as its price. Forensic analysis of the bones reveals they were not related to each other or to those buried in elite graves nearby. Isotope studies hint that some came from distant regions, their childhood diets shaped by water and food far from the Mississippi Valley. The mass grave stands as a stark reminder of the social cost behind Cahokia's splendor, a city built not only on cooperation and planning, but on sacrifice. The origins of these young women remain a mystery, setting the stage for the scientific search that would follow in the DNA lab. Inside a climate-controlled laboratory, Dr. Jane Sorensen leans over a fragment of ancient bone, her gloved hands steady as she prepares the sample. The remains come from the very heart of Cahokia's most storied mounds. Each specimen is cataloged, measured, and then subjected to a process that strips away centuries of soil and decay. Under powerful microscopes, Sorensen and her team extract DNA from the dense inner matrix of teeth and long bones, material that, until recently, would have yielded little more than dust. The next step unfolds in a room humming with sequencers and computers. Here, the extracted genetic fragments are amplified and read, base by base, until the code of each individual emerges in digital form. Specialized software compares these sequences to vast databases of ancient and modern genomes, searching for matches and outliers. The team also analyzes strontium isotopes locked within the teeth, a chemical signature that reveals where a person spent childhood, the rivers they drank from, the soil that nourished their food. Sorensen's early results send a jolt through the field. The DNA from Cahokia's burials refuses to fit any single regional profile. Instead, it reveals a patchwork of lineages. Some individuals carry mitochondrial haplogroups common in the Great Lakes, others match those found along the Gulf Coast, and a few align with populations from the Western Plains. The strontium data backs this up. A significant portion of the sampled individuals grew up hundreds of miles from the Mississippi Valley before arriving at Cahokia. The city's population was not homogeneous, nor was it the product of a single tribe expanding outward. It was a convergence, a gathering of people from far-flung regions, each bringing their own ancestry and traditions. The pattern holds across social boundaries. In elite graves, DNA points to a mix of local and distant origins. One high-status burial contains a male-female pair whose genetic markers suggest different homelands, perhaps cementing alliances through marriage. The grave goods, marine shell beads from the Gulf, copper from the northern forests, mirror the diversity seen in their DNA. Even among the sacrificed young women in mass graves, the story is the same. Few are related to each other, and many show non-local isotopic signatures. These were not local daughters, but outsiders, brought to Cahokia for reasons lost to time. As the data accumulates, Sorensen's team maps the genetic connections on a digital landscape. The lines stretch out from Cahokia in every direction, tracing networks of migration and exchange. The Metropolis was less an isolated capital and more a crossroads, a place where people, goods, and genes mingled on an unprecedented scale. The evidence upends the old narrative of a city built by a single people. It reveals instead a society fueled by movement, diversity, and constant renewal. This discovery forces a reckoning with centuries of assumptions. The Metropolis at Cahokia was not an insular outpost, but a living, breathing hub of migration and mixing. The answers to its rise and its ultimate fate are written not just in the earth, but in the code of those who once called it home. Construction at Cahokia stopped almost as quickly as it had begun. The last new mounds rose in the early 1300s. Within a single generation, the city emptied out, homes abandoned, plazas left to weeds, fires no longer lit atop the great platforms. Archaeologists searching for signs of violence or invasion found none. There are no mass graves of warriors, no layers of ash from burning, no shattered walls toppled by attackers. The palisades, once repaired and rebuilt with care, fell into disrepair. The silence that followed was sudden and absolute. Tree ring records from the region tell of a relentless drought that gripped the central Mississippi Valley in the late 1200s and early 1300s. The climate shifted, rains failed, rivers shrank. Maize fields, once the backbone of Cahokia's food supply, withered under the sun. Pollen samples from ancient lake beds show a sharp drop in cultivated crops, replaced by wild grasses and weeds. In the bones of the last generations, scientists have found hints of hardship, lines of arrested growth in children's teeth, signs of anemia, and stress fractures that suggest malnutrition or chronic labor. Yet the end came too fast for famine alone to explain. DNA from late burials offers another clue. The diversity seen in earlier centuries dwindled. Fewer newcomers arrived from distant regions. The city's role as a crossroads faded. Instead, the genetic signatures of those buried in the final decades point to shrinking, isolated families, people clinging to a place that no longer drew the world to its doorstep. Some left, seeking better land or new alliances. Others stayed behind, holding on as the city emptied around them. Disease remains a possibility, though no clear epidemic has been identified in the bones. Political turmoil or the collapse of religious authority may have played a part. The city's elaborate rituals, so central to its identity, may have lost their power to unite. The palisades, once symbols of strength, became boundaries that kept hope in and despair out. By 1400, the great plazas stood empty, the mounds overgrown, the river traffic gone. Cahokia faded from memory, its people dispersing into smaller villages along the rivers and forests of the Midwest. No single explanation fits. The drought was real, but so was the loss of connection to distant places. The city's sudden decline remains one of the deep mysteries of American archaeology, a story written in pollen, bone, and DNA, but never fully told. As Redbird, a modern descendant of those ancient builders, once said in a recorded interview, "We honor what they made, but we do not claim to know all the reasons they left. Some questions belong to the earth." Today, DNA evidence forces us to see America's first metropolis not as an isolated relic, but as a thriving nexus shaped by distant migrations and shifting identities. As new genetic breakthroughs emerge, our picture of ancient North America grows more complex and more connected. The story isn't finished. It's only just begun, written in the code we all carry. What will we choose to discover next? Share your thoughts below.